The conversation ended normally. Nothing went wrong. Nobody said anything strange. And the first thought your brain produced, the very first thing, was, what did I say that upset them? Not did I say something. What did I say? Your brain skipped the question and went straight to the conclusion. And that's the part nobody talks about. It's not just that you overthink. It's that you start from guilt, from wrongness, before there's any evidence, before anything actually happened. The default assumption isn't, that was fine. The default assumption is, something must be wrong, and it's probably me. Here's how it shows up in real life. Someone gives you a slightly shorter reply than usual. Your brain doesn't think, they're probably busy. It thinks, I said something that bothered them. A friend goes quiet in a group conversation. Your brain doesn't think, maybe they're tired. It thinks, did I say something that made the atmosphere change? Someone doesn't react to your message immediately, and by the time they reply 2 hours later, you've already run through 5 different versions of what you might have done wrong. And the exhausting thing, the thing that makes this so hard to carry, is that none of these interpretations ever start with someone else. They always start with you. You are always, automatically, the most likely source of any problem. The first suspect. Every time. Here's what's actually happening in your brain. And I want you to understand this not as a diagnosis, but as a recognition. People who live with social anxiety often have something psychologists call a negativity interpretation bias. It means that when a situation is ambiguous, when there's no clear signal about what something means, the anxious brain fills in the gap with the worst available interpretation. And in social situations, the worst available interpretation almost always involves you having done something wrong. The brain isn't doing this to punish you. It's doing it because of a very old, very deep survival logic. In our evolutionary history, it was safer to assume you'd offended someone than to assume everything was fine. If you assumed everything was fine and you were wrong, you might have lost a relationship, damaged a social bond, been excluded from the group. If you assumed you'd offended someone and you were wrong, the worst that happened was unnecessary worry. So the brain, trying to protect you, chose unnecessary worry. Every time, as the safer option. And here's the deeper layer. The one that goes below the psychology and into something more personal. For many people who default to self-blame in social situations, there's a history underneath this pattern. Moments, maybe from early in life, where being responsible for keeping the social peace became your job, where you learned, through experience, that if something felt wrong in the room, it was probably because of something you did, where you became so attuned to the emotional atmosphere around you that your first instinct, always, was to check yourself, to review your own words, to find the thing you did so that you could fix it, so that everything could go back to being okay. You didn't choose this. You were trained into it by environments where your emotional antenna needed to be that sensitive, where scanning for what you did wrong was actually useful, actually necessary, actually kept things safer. The problem is that you're still running that antenna now, in situations that don't require it, around people who are not upset with you, in conversations that are genuinely fine. If you recognize yourself in this, if the default direction of your suspicion always points inward, always lands on you, I want you to hear something that might be harder to accept than any explanation. You are not automatically at fault. Not every shift in someone's energy is about you. Not every short reply is a signal. Not every silence is an indictment. The social atmosphere around you is not your responsibility to maintain, and its fluctuations are not yours to explain. But I also know that knowing this doesn't change the reflex. The reflex is faster than the knowledge. The assumption arrives before the rational mind has had a chance to offer an alternative interpretation. And you can't simply decide to stop doing something your nervous system has been practicing for years. What you can do is something smaller. You can notice the assumption when it arrives. You can recognize it, not as truth, not as evidence, not as your instincts telling you something real, but as a reflex, a trained response, a very old habit of self-directed suspicion that learned to live inside you because, at some point, it had to. You are not always the problem. You were never as automatically guilty as your brain assumes. The people in your life are not keeping a running score of everything you said slightly wrong. And the version of you that showed up in that conversation, uncertain, imperfect, trying, was enough. It always was.